Ethan's first love was accidentally locked in the office. To punish me, he locked me in an abandoned cold storage and asked me to reflect on myself. You have to taste the same punishment that Vivien suffered, so that you can remember it. He locked me in and only gave me a bowl of water, but he didn't know that this was not an abandoned cold storage. After he left, the cold storage was started. I was shivering in the cold and desperately called for help. The door and the wall were covered with my bloody handprints asking for help. 7 days later, he wanted me to apologize and asked someone to open the cold storage. What they saw was a frozen body. Ethan was busy all day, and looked at the time. It's been 3 days, and Mandy still hasn't admitted her mistake? This woman is really stubborn. His first love Vivien came in with chicken soup. Ethan, forget it, she didn't mean it. 3 days is enough. Ethan's face softened after seeing her. You are just too kind. It would be great if Mandy could be a bit more understanding than you. Don't be so angry with me, she just cares too much about you. Hearing this, Ethan took out his mobile phone and ordered his men. Did Mandy admit her mistake? No, there is no sound inside. Mr. Ethan, will something happen? What can happen? Since she doesn't admit her mistake, let her stay. After hanging up the phone, he became indifferent again, and Vivien was very proud on this side. Ethan, you will never get my response, because I am already dead. I was already dead 3 days ago. The abandoned cold storage was powered on after they left, and I was alone in it, crying to the sky and the earth, but no one answered. At first, there were voices outside the door. I desperately clapped and begged, but what I got in return was the indifference of the guards. Mr. Ethan said that you should reflect in there. Miss Mandy, please don't make things difficult for us. No. Please, the cold storage is activated, come quickly. But there was no sound outside the door. They left. At first, I was able to remain calm and find a way out. But as the temperature dropped, I couldn't think at all, and could only run in circles, to increase the heat. In the end, I couldn't even run, I just felt that I was frozen. I curled up in the corner, hoping to be warmer. This was originally a seafood freezer. After the goods were moved away, there were only shelves. I piled all the shelves in front of me, hoping to block the cold air. But it still didn't help. The moment I realized that I was dead, my heart was cold bit by bit. When I saw my body, I was really scared. I was standing in the corner, my body covered in frost and my eyes filled with despair. The door and walls were all covered with my nail marks, and my fingers were stained with blood. I was about to go over, but the next second, I was sucked out by a suction force and came to Ethan's side. I felt ridiculous when I heard his words at this time. Ethan, I will reflect on this with my life, and I will never see you again in the next life. I stood aside, watching Ethan and Vivien look at each other, and Vivien took out her phone and handed it to him. Ethan, I have booked tickets for the exhibition, you can accompany me to see it tomorrow. Okay. It's getting late, you go to rest first. But Vivien held his hand. I'm afraid of the dark, you accompany me. Ethan had no choice but to get up. I forgot that Vivien lived in my house. After she came back from abroad, the first thing she did was to contact Ethan. She asked to live in our house with the excuse that she was unfamiliar with the place. It's ridiculous, she is a local, and she has been abroad for 5 years, so she is unfamiliar with the place? When I objected, Ethan looked impatient. Mandy, her parents are not local, do you know how dangerous it is for a girl to live alone? I know, because I also rented a house before marriage. Ethan said to me at that time, Mandy, girls should respect themselves. I don't want to live together before marriage. Now I think about it, he played double standards to the fullest. Ethan accompanied Vivien to the guest room. It's called a guest room, it's right next to our master bedroom, and I originally planned to use it as a baby room. But when Vivien came, she said that the room had enough light, and she said she liked it, so Ethan gave it to her directly. I watched Ethan coldly as he sent her to the guest room. Vivien was about to leave when a flash of lightning flashed across the sky. With a click, the lightning struck, and she screamed and threw herself into Ethan's arms. Ethan's body stiffened, and Vivien hugged him tightly. Ethan, I'm so scared, can you stay with me? Ethan's hand stayed on her back for a moment, and patted her. Okay. At that moment, I just felt like a clown, because I was also afraid of thunder. I still remember when I lived alone, it suddenly rained heavily at night, with lightning and thunder, and the power outage happened at home. I was so scared that I almost cried. So I called him to ask him to comfort me. But what did Ethan say? How old are you and you are still so afraid of thunder? Mandy, don't use this method to get my concern. You have to know that you are an adult and independent, so be good, okay? He hung up the phone, and I spent that night wrapped tightly in the quilt, relying on the flashlight of my mobile phone. I fell asleep only at dawn. Now I think about it, I am so humble. Obviously Ethan doesn't care at all. It seems that there is always a wall between him and me. I smiled bitterly. Although I am dead, I am really afraid of this thunder. I hugged my arms and trembled. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't leave. I could only stay and watch Ethan hug Vivien to comfort her. And she huddled in Ethan's arms, her eyes sharp and proud. I sighed. Vivien will always be the Cinnabar mole in Ethan's heart. What am I? I shook my head and looked outside. Even if I died, I was still afraid of thunder. Fortunately, this didn't last too long. An hour later, the thunder stopped and Ethan left the guest room. Vivien looked at his back and smiled proudly, muttering to herself, Ethan. You will always be mine, and no one can take you away. I was a little surprised to hear this. Until now, she still thought about Ethan. Why did she leave in the first place? Ethan was the same. Since he couldn't forget, why did he marry me? After returning, Ethan was uncharacteristically looking at my photo on his phone and said in a deep voice, Mandy, I hope you can learn a lesson. If you give in and admit your mistakes, I will let you out. I looked at Ethan's face and just thought it was ridiculous. Give in? Admit your mistakes. What did I do wrong? It wasn't me who locked Vivien in the office. But Ethan didn't listen to my explanation at all, because Vivien said like a bitch that she didn't blame me, so Ethan was sure that it must be me who did it. He locked me in an abandoned cold storage and killed me, and now he wants me to admit my mistake? How ridiculous. Ethan is also a smart man, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to sit in the position of president of the company, but when it came to Vivien's incident, he became deaf and blind. The next morning, the person guarding the cold storage felt something was wrong and came to report tremblingly, Mr. Ethan, should we release Miss Mandy? There is no sound in the cold storage. That bowl of water can't last for 5 days. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then said coldly, without food or drink, a bowl of water can last for 10 days. Since she is so stubborn, let's continue. I want to see how long she can hold on. But there is no sound inside. We are a little worried. What if Miss Mandy? Don't worry, Mandy will pretend. Ethan's words have determined my life or death, so the guards don't say anything more. At this time, Vivien walked in. When she heard him say this, she smiled, Ethan, forget it, it's been several days, I'm fine. No, she kept you locked up in the office for so long, she should be punished. Vivien smiled, but said, Ethan, isn't it too much? After all, she is your wife. She treated me. It's also my fault. I always bother you and make her jealous. Just let her go. Vivien said it nicely, and on the surface she helped me to excuse myself, but every word nailed me to death. Ethan just fell for her trick. Vivien, you are so soft-hearted, forget it, for your sake, I will give her a chance. Vivien's face choked. She didn't expect Ethan to say that. Seeing that her face was not right, Ethan asked, what's wrong? Nothing, just thinking that I haven't seen you for several days, I still want to take a doctor to see. Is Vivien so kind? I doubt it. But she is right. Take a doctor to confirm that I am dead. To avoid trouble later. Ethan, I look forward to you discovering the truth. I really want to see your expression when you know I'm dead. Ethan took a deep breath and pulled Vivien, if only she could be as understanding as you. Ethan, she is your wife after all. Ethan's eyes were complicated, and I sneered. I never wanted to argue with Vivien. Madam? This title is really ironic. Even if there was no so-called reflection this time, I would have planned to divorce him. I've had enough. It's just a pity for that little life. I couldn't help but cover my belly, feeling very sad. At this time, Ethan's face darkened and his voice left no room for doubt. No, you don't have to plead for her, Mandy is just pretending. Every time she either hurts here or there, or she says she didn't do it. I've seen through her. None of you are allowed to plead for her. Unless she apologizes, you are not allowed to come out. Vivien seemed relieved after hearing this, and stood aside without saying anything, while I was a little stunned. Ethan, so this is how I feel in your heart. I felt a sharp pain in my heart, but fortunately, I was dead and didn't care about anything. Ethan finally remembered me and led people to the abandoned cold storage. When they arrived at the door, the guard trembled. Mr. Ethan. Mandy hasn't given in yet? Mr. Ethan, no, we asked through the door, and there was no response from inside. Miss Mandy, won't something happen? I'm worried. Ethan snorted coldly. What's there to worry about, just pretending to be mysterious. Open the door, this woman, I want to hear her apologize in person. Vivien's mouth curled up, and the guards hurried over. After several people opened the door of the cold storage, they were dumbfounded. Ethan's voice came from behind, let her out. Mr. Ethan, the cold storage seems to be activated. Ethan walked over. What activation? You want to shirk responsibility. At this time, he stood at the door, and the cold air inside kept pouring out, which was chilling. Ethan's face turned pale. Mandy, don't think I will forgive you just because you opened the cold storage. Get out of here. Silence, everyone around looked at each other. Ethan was furious, and after hesitating for a long time, he said coldly, bring her out to me. As soon as the voice fell, several people rushed in, and when they saw the frozen corpse curled up in the corner behind the shelf, they were terrified. Miss Mandy has been frozen to death. Ethan was furious. Nonsense. How could she die? He rushed in, and there was a person curled up behind several rows of shelves. Ethan trembled, and I followed behind him. Although I was ready, I was still a little scared when I saw my own body. I opened my eyes and stared straight ahead, looking at him straight in the face. My face was covered in frost, and my fingers were all covered in dried blood. The ground and the walls were full of traces of my struggle. The moment our eyes met, Ethan staggered twice, and knelt in front of me with a plop. He stretched out his hand and trembled, wanting to touch her, but he didn't dare. No, this is not her, it's impossible. The cold storage is abandoned, how could she be frozen? Go and check the surveillance for me and see what's going on. He turned his head and saw the bloody handprint on the wall. He stood up with his lips pursed, pounced on it, touched the wall, and looked at me in the corner. Although his hands were frozen, they were still bloody, and all 10 fingers were bloody. Ethan was crazy and suddenly came forward to hug me. Mandy, you did it on purpose, right? This is all fake, you are scaring me, right? Get up, get up. I don't believe you're leaving like this. Mandy, hurry up, I don't blame you, I won't punish you, you don't need to reflect, hurry up. Get up. Talk to me. He pulled me madly, but my body was frozen, and he pulled me to the ground with a thump. Ethan staggered twice and fell to the ground. Vivien outside the door turned pale with fear, and then a trace of calmness flashed in her eyes. Ethan, she is dead, you have to mourn. Ethan turned his head to look at her, and the next second he roared, she is not dead. How could she die? Impossible. The doctor he brought came forward and shook his head and said, Mr. Ethan, there is no sign of life. At this time, the gatekeeper hurried over. Mr. Ethan, the surveillance was destroyed, but our people have been guarding outside the gate. Ethan was stunned. If this is the case, it means that when he entered that day, the cold storage was already operating normally. He was furious and said to the surroundings, what do you think? After taking off his clothes, he wrapped me up and rushed out with me in his arms. Mandy, I will take you to the hospital, you will not die. If you can't be saved, I will let all of you be buried with me. Ethan was crazy, stepped on the accelerator and rushed out, straight to the hospital. I followed him all the way, and seeing his hysterical appearance, I couldn't help but sigh. Ethan, why are you pretending now? I begged you to investigate the truth with all my heart, but you didn't believe me and had to punish me. Now I'm dead, why are you acting affectionate here? So boring. A hint of sarcasm appeared on the corner of my mouth, and I saw Ethan holding me and rushing into the hospital. The doctors were shocked by him. Hurry up and save her. Hurry up and save her. When the doctor saw him holding the frozen me, his pupils tightened at that time. After confirming that I had no vital signs, he shook his head. Sorry, the patient is dead. Nonsense. She was still breathing, why didn't you save her? Why? Ethan made a scene in the emergency room, and the hospital had no choice but to call the police. When the police came, they were also a little surprised to see me, because I was frozen to death. It's summer now. Due to Ethan's identity, the police persuaded me and took my body away for autopsy. Ethan didn't agree at first, but he just wanted to find out what happened to me, so he agreed. I looked at his lost soul and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Ethan, if you know the truth, don't cry at my grave. The news of my death spread quickly, and Ethan sat in the corridor without saying a word. At this time, Vivien came over. She hugged Ethan tightly. Ethan, the dead can't be resurrected, you have to cheer up as soon as possible. Why do you say that? Who doesn't want her to live? I just want her to give in. Why do you treat me like this? Hearing this, Vivien's eyes flashed with cruelty, and then her body swayed and she fell into his arms. Vivien, what's wrong with you? Mandy has left me, you must not be in trouble. Ethan, I feel dizzy. After Vivien finished speaking, she fainted in his arms. Ethan was very anxious and hurriedly carried her to the ward. After waiting for her to wake up, Ethan was about to leave Vivien, but she held his hand tightly again. Don't leave me, okay? He stayed by Vivien's side with a loving look on his face, which was really touching. His wife was frozen to death and was undergoing an autopsy, but he actually had time to accompany another woman. Ethan, how big is your heart? It was raining outside again, with thunder and lightning. Ethan murmured, was she scared that night? Vivien was stunned. What did you say? That night when it thundered, was she scared in the cold storage? Vivien's face was so ugly that Ethan pushed her hand away. Vivien, I have something else to do, I'll leave first. Vivien rushed over. Ethan, don't go, don't go. She held Ethan tightly, but Ethan pried her hands apart bit by bit. If you're really scared, I'll ask the doctor to give you an injection, and you won't be scared after a good night's sleep. Hearing this, she was stunned and looked at Ethan in disbelief. I laughed. Ethan, you know how to refuse, why didn't you refuse her pestering at the beginning? After saying that, Ethan walked away and I followed him. Ethan's assistant came up to him and said, Mr. Ethan, the surveillance video shows that someone did enter the cold storage that day and secretly opened it, but it was wrapped tightly. We are investigating. Hearing this, Ethan clenched his fists and said, investigate at all costs. And what else? The assistant said in a deep voice, does Miss Vivien really have claustrophobia? Just because she was locked in the office, did her old illness relapse? The office is so bright, and there was no power outage that night, how could Miss Vivien? The assistant was about to say something, but stopped. Ethan frowned, stopped and looked at him. What do you mean? The assistant hurriedly said, I don't know what kind of person Miss Vivien is, but I know Miss Mandy, she would never do that kind of thing. I almost cried when I heard it. Ethan, look, even your assistant will speak for me, have you ever believed me? Ethan shook his head. No, Vivien has always been kind-hearted and would never do such a thing. But. No buts. The assistant was about to say something, but seeing this look, he had to give up. But I clearly saw a trace of indignation flash across the assistant's face. Fortunately someone will help me. In this way, I don't have to worry. Ethan, it doesn't matter if you don't believe me, someone will naturally believe me. Before the autopsy report came out, I don't know who exposed the news of my death. The video of Ethan holding me and screaming in the hospital that day was uploaded to the internet. Netizens were shocked. The wife of a CEO was frozen to death in the cold storage, what a joke. The wife is dead, the husband is the most suspicious, I suggest the police to investigate. He doesn't look like he is acting when he is sad. I think he is just too good at acting. His wife was frozen to death in the cold storage. Oh my God. I know that cold storage, there is a small path in the backyard, but who led Ethan's wife there? Inside information, Ethan sent someone to the cold storage for his mistress. Explosion. Isn't he a murderer? How dare he yell in the hospital? Netizens' mouths were like poison, not giving Ethan any face at all. I watched Ethan click on those comments with shaking hands, his face pale. He didn't expect that netizens would hit the nail on the head and expose his true face. Ethan, you see, everyone's eyes are sharp. I was shocked at my own big heart. At this time, it seemed that I had no feelings for Ethan anymore. I actually felt better when I saw his face. At the moment before I was frozen to death, I was still wondering why Ethan didn't believe me. Now think about it, if he doesn't love me, he doesn't love me. No matter what, he can't have any sympathy for me. Otherwise, he wouldn't have pushed me in at the critical moment, regardless of anything, and forced me to reflect on myself, and didn't let anyone check it. At this time, Ethan sent the video to his assistant, and his face was very ugly. "Mandy, I hope this is just an accident." I glanced at him with disdain. "How can it be an accident? This is man-made. You are the culprit. Didn't you take me in with your own hands? If you have to bear legal responsibility, you are indeed the murderer." Unfortunately, Ethan couldn't hear. I sat on the sofa and looked at him. Ethan was lost in thought holding my photo. During this time, Vivien called him countless times. The piercing ringing sound penetrated the entire office, but Ethan ignored it. This was not like him. Vivien couldn't help it after all, and broke into Ethan's villa. "Ethan? The dead can't be resurrected, you can't give up on yourself like this. You've lost weight." Vivien was distressed and was about to step forward, but Ethan looked at her and took a step back. Vivien was stunned. "Ethan, you..." "Vivien, I don't have much time to accompany you recently, you should go back to your own home." Vivien was stunned immediately. "You clearly know that I'm here. You are an adult, there is nothing you can't get through." Ethan's words made her dumbfounded. I sneered at the side. "Yes, adult life is not easy, Vivien, you have also suffered this day." She was about to speak, Ethan's cell phone rang. He was shocked when he received the call. "Okay, come right away." He hurried out, and Vivien was left behind. "Ethan, let me go with you." Ethan didn't think much, and took her directly to the police station. When he got the autopsy report, he took a deep breath and didn't dare to look at it at all. The police said to him, "The preliminary autopsy determined that the deceased had been dead for 7 days, and she was 2 months pregnant before her death." "What did you say? Pregnant?" Ethan was stunned and looked at the police in disbelief, while Vivien covered her mouth exaggeratedly. "Mandy is pregnant, how is it possible?" "Police comrades, are you mistaken? Ethan, you and Mandy are not without feelings, you said you didn't touch her at all. Then her child is..." She seemed to have discovered something and immediately covered her mouth. Ethan's face was surprised. "No, the child is mine." Vivien's face was pale, and I laughed. "Yes, this child is Ethan's." That day, Vivien happened to go to a concert with someone and took a photo of it on WeChat Moments. Ethan was very angry when he saw it, and he drank too much that night. He was very fierce that day. I was so exhausted by him that I forgot to take medicine, and I got pregnant. Now I think I was really stupid. He clearly used me as a tool to relieve his sexual desire, but I was still stupid enough to be with him. At this time, Ethan also thought of something and slapped himself hard. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Vivien was distressed and hurried forward to grab his hand, but was thrown away by Ethan, and she staggered. "Don't touch me." "Vivien, I'm sorry, I can't accept it." He was panicked and staggered out of the police station, leaving with the autopsy report. At this time, the assistant also received news. "Mr. Ethan, we caught that guy." Ethan was stunned for a moment, then he cheered up, stepped on the accelerator and rushed out, and I followed him. When we arrived at the place and saw the familiar cold storage, I was shocked. The assistant pointed inside and said, "It's him. He has confessed that Vivien gave him 500,000 yuan and asked him to turn on the power. The transfer records have been confirmed." Hearing this, Ethan directly grabbed the assistant's neck. "Do you know what you are talking about?" "Mr. Ethan, I am not wrong, it is indeed Vivien, these are the evidence of the transfer, and there was a hidden camera in the backyard at that time that also captured the whole process of their transaction. Also, it was not Miss Mandy who locked her in the office, but she locked it herself and framed Miss Mandy." The assistant's words tore off all of Vivien's fig leaves, and I couldn't help laughing when I heard it from the side. Ethan stumbled and looked up at the bloody handprint on the wall. His face turned pale, and he cried and laughed. I didn't know if he was pretending or because he was too shocked. He kept saying sorry. "I'm sorry, Mandy, it's all my fault, it's my fault. How could I be so stupid to believe her lies?" I sneered, "The belated affection is cheaper than grass. You just said that when the child died. What's the use of these sorries to me? I'm already dead, and your apology can't bring me back, so don't pretend in front of me." I didn't want to pay attention to Ethan, but I couldn't leave him, and I felt a little speechless. I touched my belly and couldn't help sighing when I saw Ethan's hysterical look. "Ethan, this is all your fault." It took him a long time to calm down. He glanced at the man in the cold storage and couldn't help his sharp eyes. The man trembled immediately. I was wrong, I was wrong. What are you going to do? You turned on the power and caused my wife to die tragically. Now you can try the same thing. Lock him in and turn on the power. The man became anxious immediately. You can't do this, you can't. I'm just doing things for someone in exchange for money. Please, I'm willing to testify in court. I'm willing. Ethan didn't care. Go to court? Going to jail is too easy for you. Throw him in. No matter how he begged, Ethan just wouldn't let him go. He locked him in the cold storage and sent someone to watch him. After just a few hours, there was no movement inside. Looking at the man who was already frozen stiff, Ethan ordered expressionlessly, "Bring Vivien here." Vivien probably didn't expect that she would fail in the end. When she was caught by Ethan and brought to the cold storage, she immediately trembled like a sieve. From her expression, you can tell that she is not immune to my death. Ethan, what's wrong with you? Vivien, was it really Mandy who locked you up that day? The sudden words made her stunned. Vivien said in a daze, I don't blame her, Mandy didn't do it on purpose. Ethan, it's been so long, why are you still asking this? Ethan grinned and laughed, what? Of course, I did what I like to do. Some people know a person's face, but not his heart. I really misjudged him. Vivien, what deep hatred do you have with Mandy? Ethan, what's wrong with you? Don't call me Ethan, it's disgusting. His words made Vivien's eyes darken, and she stopped pretending. You know everything? If you know, why are you doing this? Why? I'm helping you. Ethan, she doesn't deserve you. Vivien sneered, you are always like this, no matter what happens, you will stand by me unconditionally, I just want you to see what it's like to be done once and for all. If Mandy doesn't listen, then let her die in there. Don't you also want to see her disappear in front of you? Why are you pretending to be affectionate with me now? Her words undoubtedly stabbed Ethan's heart like a sharp knife, and Ethan's face turned pale. Vivien laughed, I didn't want to do this at first, but after I came back and took a look, I found that you still have a good impression of me. I just cut my finger, and you couldn't wait to come to my side. To say Mandy, she is really stupid and loves you deeply. At this point, Vivien didn't pretend anymore and directly exposed her true colors. Ethan looked at him like this, and he held her down and pinched her until her face turned red. I watched them killing each other from the side, and suddenly I felt very funny, the belated affection was worse than the grass. I used to think Ethan was really unreasonable. If he didn't love me, why didn't he let go? Now I know that he is really a jerk, to the extreme. If he had asked me for a divorce and married Vivien, I would have admired him. But he ruined my life in vain. Now Vivien's words made Ethan crazy. He slapped Vivien in the face, bitch. I couldn't stand it, so I turned around and walked away, but I unexpectedly found that I had walked out of the cold storage and was no longer tied by Ethan. This discovery made me feel relieved. It seems that God doesn't want me to waste time anymore, so he gave me a chance. I was thinking about where to go for a walk, and at this time, the sirens sounded everywhere. I was stunned. Looking at the police cars and reporters entering all around, I reacted. She laughed immediately. Then Ethan's case of suspected murder of his wife became a hot topic. Everyone knew that I was frozen to death, and the notice issued by the police showed that it was Vivien who ordered someone to turn on the power and caused my tragic death. As soon as the report came out, everyone came over immediately. I said there must be a mistress, Ethan is poisonous. I'm really hungry, he's a cheap bone at first glance. Do men have no ability to judge bitches? I want to know how many years he can be sentenced for killing his wife for such a bitch. He will be released soon if he spends money to operate. As expected, netizens are really powerful. They guessed Ethan's operation immediately. He hired a lawyer, and in addition to this matter, they were originally husband and wife. He also had a responsibility behind me, but not too much. It was Vivien who indirectly caused my death. Therefore, Ethan came out directly after paying a large sum of bail. I didn't want to see him, but I didn't expect Ethan to come to the cemetery with my urn. But how could this guy have the nerve to carve the words "beloved wife" on his tombstone? He was clearly the one who caused me to do this. Ethan, please don't cry in front of my grave, I'm afraid you will stay in the path of reincarnation. I shook my head and sighed. Forget it, he is already dead, what he wants has nothing to do with me. My future is still very long, there is no need to worry about such small things. Ethan poured a bottle of wine on my grave. I'm sorry, Mandy, I'm sorry for you and the baby. I didn't expect that you died tragically because of my one thought. I will never be able to pay you back in this life and the next. I rolled my eyes. Ethan, you scumbag. I don't want to scold, I have netizens to identify it for me. He took out his mobile phone and put it aside. On it were the wedding photos of the two of us. I was a little surprised, but I didn't expect that Ethan still kept this photo. I remembered when I was taking wedding photos before, Ethan answered the phone as soon as it was confirmed, and then left, leaving me to take wedding photos alone. The photographer still looked embarrassed. I took the wedding photos alone that day, and I was used to Ethan leaving me behind at critical moments. No need to think that he must have gone to Vivien. This is not the first time, every time I date Ethan or are alone with him, Vivien always breaks it up. Either my finger was broken or the water pipe burst. Anyway, I felt a little uncomfortable in her shadow. I'm not surprised at all that Ethan has left me to find her now. I went home quietly after filming that day. I originally wanted to break up with Ethan, but I really couldn't stand him treating me like this. I am also a living person of flesh and blood, but I can't defend myself against Ethan. Ethan came back in the evening and brought me a large bouquet of flowers, and I forgave him then. Forgive me for being so in love at that time, I didn't even know that Vivien was causing trouble. Later, I found a card among the flowers, and it was signed as a gift from him to Vivien, which made me feel disheartened. But it's different now. I'm dead. To argue with a dead person would make Vivien think too highly of herself. Don't worry, Mandy, I won't let Vivien come out. As for Vivien, the court sentenced her to 10 years in prison, and I used my connections to send her to a prison full of thugs. She will be served very comfortably. At this time, I looked at Ethan and shook my head. Everyone else has their retribution. Ethan, where's your retribution? Ethan raised his head and drank all the wine in the bottle, then leaned in front of my tombstone and fell asleep with red eyes. I couldn't help but shake my head when I saw his appearance. Ethan, goodbye, I hope I will never see you again in the next life.